Welcome to our second episode of the Future of Contact Centers. I'm your host, Trevor Clark. Here with me is Nate Nemore. We're just a couple of guys who feel like there's a much better way to contact center. And so we're going to be talking about trends in the industry. You'll hear a lot about the gig economy and how we think that plays into the future of contact centers. Anyway, it's really nice to have you here. Thank you for joining. So Nate, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so I think today, well, first of all, renewed for episode 2 of the Powers That Be, so we're back.
Yes.
But no, I think today what we really want to zone in on is seasonality and hiring in season, right? So within your 12 months, you have, every single month is another industry that needs so much support from their contact center. And I think we really want to dive into kind of the old ways of hiring from a contact center perspective to what we believe is the right way in GigCX.
Every contact center that I've ever worked with has some form of seasonality or volatility in their demand. And so I think that seasonality, you may not, when you listen to this, you might not think, oh, this applies to me, but we kind of think it does. Like everyone kind of experiences seasonality.
Sure.
On the extreme examples like tax season, where you have thousands or millions of calls or contacts in a short amount of time and then it goes away entirely. That's one extreme, but then there's less extreme examples, like you said, like home services, where maybe the summer is busier than the winter for a lot of reasons. And so thanks for that kickoff, because I think you're right. Like the way we've staffed for seasonal work in contact centers is rough. It's hard, and it really doesn't work. We force it, and companies do it. Some do it really well, some do it not so well. But to me, it feels outdated, and I think a lot of companies, especially ones with more extreme seasonal needs, are going to feel a lot of this pressure every single year. And it's hard. It's hard on the managerial teams. It's hard on the people that are operating it day in, day out, and it's really hard on the agents in your contact center.
Sure.
So, I mean, what do you think about that?
I think, a big issue in the old ways of hiring when people need seasonality is you hire when you need help, not before you need the help. And then that really creates a plethora of issues, right? Because then you're bringing in and you're creating this inadequate onboarding situation where you're bringing in these new people and you're saying, this is our culture and we're so excited to have you on the team and we need help. But wow, you have to perform right now, and there's no easing into the job, right? It's training and going. And so it creates a lot of stress in an organization.
Yeah, because I mean, I've gone through several seasonal projects, and it's always like when you do the modeling and the planning, it's almost like you need to start hiring immediately in advance of the season. So that could be months in advance. But then you run it by the finance team and they're saying, well, you can't do that. It's way too expensive. And you say, well, then it creates this sort of like, yeah, we need the help, but we can't, it's really expensive. It's hard to operate. It puts a lot of pressure on the organization. I also think another issue is that we're sort of fitting a square peg in a round hole. Like the agents that we're hiring for these seasonal jobs are actually looking for something more permanent. So you're basically saying, oh, we're gonna go hire, say, 1,000 agents or even 20 or whatever the number is, but only for a few months. Who's gonna take that job?
Well, it's a deterrent for the recruiting team too, right? The recruiters know that, a big blocker when you're hiring is temp work.
Right.
And so, but they're under this huge pressure to bring in the amount of people needed for the organizations that are supporting the brand.
So they skip that detail. Oh, then the agent gets in and they're like, well, I didn't realize it was temporary, or maybe they didn't fully grasp the situation. And then what happens? A few months later?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can tell people, if you work hard, you may be able to stay on long term, which is true, but it really just ends up in massive layoffs.
Yeah.
From my experience personally.
It typically does. Yeah, you'll find a few people will emerge from that and find something long term, and that's great. I think that's awesome. Especially, it's a good opportunity for companies to get better talent, but it's really not a good employee experience. It affects those that are coming in, right? Obviously that's a big disruptive event for them. What about the people that are in the organization year round? I mean, it's like, who are all these strangers everywhere? Like, what does it do to the culture?
Yeah. I mean, it puts a lot of stress on those individuals, and they feel it. They know that there's an outside pressure to perform, and then they're also a little worried of, I've been here year round. We've never had these amount of people that we have now. why is this sustainable? And it's usually never sustainable.
And then maybe they're thinking,
Seasonality.
right? They're thinking, well, I've been working here year round, but what if these other people come in and outperform me? Now am I on the
Yeah, and I think
the
old
chopping
contact
block?
centers think that drives competitiveness, where I think it really just drives fear.
Anxiety, yeah,
Yeah.
fear, absolutely. It's not the right
Mm-mm.
fit. It's going to drive bad behavior. I think it's going to create apathy too. I mean, you look at agents that, maybe they don't believe that they're in the top tier.
Yeah,
And so what do they do now? If there's no reward at the end of it, are they going to give it their all?
sure.
I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
another big issue too, and I think what we were really trying to solve in our industry is no one really has, or it's very difficult to skill assess properly when you're hiring so many people at
Oh,
once, right?
totally.
You have to have tools, number one, and then you have to have the person that is aware, to your point, of what skills am I even looking for
Right.
to bring these people in. And that's, I mean, I don't know how you think about that, but that to me is, you can bring in 100 people, but if you're not skill assessing these individuals, or you don't know what skills to look for, you bring 100 people in for,
I mean, I think it's funny to even
You know?
assume there's skill assessment going on in seasonal work. I mean,
Yeah,
to me,
it's probably-
it's like,
yeah.
let's find, warm bodies with heartbeats.
and then you talk about it being disruptive. Well, then you have like the executive team, maybe, or the higher operations team saying, well, we brought in 100 people, but they're not suitable for the gig.
Of course, because you've already
know?
got talent shortages.
So why is performance bad? Well,
Yeah. You're compounding other issues. It's hard enough to run a year-round contact center. Why? I mean, you can only imagine what it is when you're trying to flex up by 15x or something in a short amount of time. You're gonna get challenging talent. It's gonna be a challenge to get good talent. Anyway, so I think we've covered a lot of the issues. I mean, we know it's hard. If anybody's ever been in a seasonal campaign or had to do any sort of like acquisition or merger where it just creates this influx of volume and then it goes away, it's a lot of work. It takes sometimes years of planning, year-round sort of awareness of, what are we going to be doing? What happened last year? What do we need to learn? I mean, it's a lot of work. But we actually think, and we've seen it quite a few times now, is that the gig model, that could alleviate all these challenges. And so when I look at, one of the main problems, and I think we were saying, like, the job seeker in the traditional employment model is looking for something more permanent, and that's a lot of the friction, right? You're kind of forcing people into something that they're not really wanting. You're opening the doors up to lots and lots of people, and you're degrading talent.
sure.
But there's another workforce out there that actually signs up for this type of thing all the time, and that's the gig economy. And just so everyone's aware, gig economy is like the same kind of workforce that an Uber driver or Lyft or Instacart, DoorDash, Upwork. I don't know. There's
There's a lot. There's furniture companies out there where they go and assemble furniture at your house. They're gig workers. So there's a lot of variances.
and then there's shift off.
And there's shift off. There's shift off.
We
yeah,
do that
for sure.
too. But I mean, the reason I think it works really well is that this workforce is actually signing up for autonomy, flexibility, variety. Actually, they love the idea of working 4 months on tax or 6 months in a home services project, because they kind of like the variety, and they also like to do a few things to control their income as well.
Yeah, I mean, autonomy is a huge thing right now in job seekers. There's a study from McKinsey, and there's a couple of interesting stats in it. One is 87% of workers who are offered any sort of flexibility, whether it's when they work or how they work, take it on an average of 3 days per week. So that's a huge sample. And then it also, in the same study, warns employers of flexibility is probably the number one pivotal deciding factor over compensation or anything other.
We've been
It's crazy, right? And
we've been
so-
saying that for the past couple of years too, and I think it's awesome to have somebody like McKinsey actually back that up. Can we link that? We should link that into the comments.
For sure.
Make sure people can read that study.
Yep.
So say that study again. It was 87%.
87% of workers that were offered at least some sort of flexibility of remote work took it on an average of 3 times per week.
Oh wow. Well, and so that I think there's a lot of other conversation. Maybe we'll cover that in our next episode or a subsequent episode about that whole movement back to the office too. I mean, this creates other problems, but
for sure.
But I think autonomy, flexibility, these are things we talk about a lot. I think we found. I read something this morning actually about I think 73 million Americans are estimated to be participating in the gig economy. That's actually up quite a bit from what I thought previously. It was like 57. We'll find that article too, or that data point. But I mean, 73 million, that's a lot.
Well, that's over 30% easily.
Yeah, it's almost, I think it's almost 40 of
Right.
like the workforce. And
Right.
then, so you look at that and you say, well, man, there's a massive part of our workforce that's out there looking for work, doing this type of stuff, looking for the variety. How do we tap into that?
Mhm.
I mean, so to me, it's an obvious area
Yeah.
to like solve this problem, especially if you need tens or hundreds or even thousands of agents for just a few months or a few weeks or a few hours. Like that's the answer.
You can find them, but you can't find them through kind of what we're saying in the first segment of traditional hiring. Like it's not there.
They're not there.
It's not there.
They've left. That's why you have, well, let's see. The other thing we learned this morning, I looked up the latest Bureau of Labor statistics. There's 9.6 million job openings.
Yeah, I
Right
saw
now.
that this morning too.
It's actually gone down, which is good. I think a couple.
Stabilizing a little bit.
Yeah, but it's still about 40% high, 36%, 37% higher than it was in February 2020. So before the pandemic, it was, again, we're 37% higher than that. So I mean, again, I think that's another data point to say, all right, the traditional model is sort of being abandoned in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to go follow the talent. Have you guys ever been, do you remember what it was like to be in a taxi cab and then to go into an Uber for the first time? And
Yeah.
I remember my first Uber, it was like, the
First
car was
class.
clean, it smelled great, and the driver handed me a bottle of water.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is great, I'm never going back. And
Yeah.
I don't go back. I think what that tells me is like having an independent, self-accountable work, like somebody who's accountable to themselves, is going to do a better job, or at least they tend to, right? And so we find repeatedly, and we see this in our flexible work, in our contact center agents, like they tend to outperform the norm.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a lot of research that does show that, like we talked about in the previous episode, where employers are coming out and saying that people who are working at home are performing just as good or better than people on site. And so we see that at Shift Off every single day. So we know that to be true. And I think, we also have a study here from, MBO partners that say, 79% of individuals that work in the gig economy are happy than having a traditional job.
Yeah, no
Right.
doubt.
I mean, that's an astonishing statistic.
Yeah, it makes sense too. I mean, we see it all day.
Yeah, I mean,
it's crazy.
The flexibility is huge, and I think and then if you break it down, I think like you were mentioning Upwork, right? I mean, 51% of freelancers would not go back to traditional work if they had the opportunity.
No, they wouldn't. I mean, and,
So-
and I think if you're listening to the last episode, one of the things, in fact, I think during the recording of the episode, we stumbled on the word choice,
Yeah,
and I thought that was great because what we're basically saying is that the workforce, whether you're using a traditional model and you want people to be in the office or in a traditional schedule or whatever that may be, or you're looking for the gig economy option,
sure.
what we're basically saying is let's create choice for folks, because gig isn't the best option for everyone either. So there's still a solid talent pool
Yeah,
in the traditional model, but what I think we're seeing is having both options or using a hybrid model where you've got your traditional team, and in fact you sort of augment that traditional team with gig to make the traditional model work better.
well, you create flexibility, and I was reading another study earlier this morning, posted by Forbes, and it was talking about talent shortages persisting in the United States, even though the economy may be stabilizing, kind of what you were saying. But the number one tip they gave for employers is to use flexibility, whether that's
Totally makes sense.
some sort of remote work or some sort of accommodation for workers with their family life, work-life balance. And I think you can tie that back to like employers and companies where flexibility to them may mean, yeah, okay, we're going to keep our internal team with our busy season because they're tenured, and that's a really smart thing to do. You don't want to lose tenure during a busy season, but at the same time, how do I make this less chaotic and achieve the results I need to achieve? And I really think the answer is the gig economy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a form of flexibility that's out there for every single organization in the world right now.
Yeah, and if we take it back to, you said something just a second ago that made me think about how people will actually, if you go into the flexible model for seasonality, right? So if you tap into that seasonal group, well, that seasonal group, or sorry, that flexible on-demand workforce, the gig economy, whatever you want to call it, they've kind of decided to do this forever. And so
Yep.
guess what happens next season? So let's say 4 months of just grueling flexing up to support customers.
They're going to come back.
They'll come back.
Yep.
But what do you think happens when you've hired someone and fired them in a traditional model? Do they come back? I don't think so.
Well, they never come back. But also, what do you do with your culture? I mean, your culture takes a huge. I mean, that's when
Yeah.
you go on Google and you're like, wow, look at those bad reviews. But it's back to, it's almost it's a really stressful point when recruiters are hiring for seasonality,
Yeah.
and they're forced between getting the job done and maybe not telling somebody that it's seasonal, or
It's totally.
I mean, they're in a really bad situation where when you tap into the gig economy, they may know it's seasonal or it's being told to them fully transparent, but that's what they do. They want to work, and they're working more hours than you would ever imagine. I mean, you would
yeah.
ever imagine. I mean,
That's one of the most common misconceptions, I think.
it's a
about this
huge myth.
So we actually find that our agents are working at or more, like I'd say more than half of the agents are working more than a full-time schedule when you compare productivity. So productivity is higher. Now, there's it is a range. Obviously, you have some that work fewer hours, and that's okay. But then you get a lot that actually highly productive, more productive than your full-time people. I promise you.
Yeah.
And the model can reward that too. So you want people that are putting in the work, and then you kind of reinforce. You say, okay, cool. You're gonna do the work. You're gonna do a great job. We're gonna give you more opportunities, and so then that creates even more accountability.
Yeah,
better
and it
performance.
eliminates this old conception, of like people saying, "Well, why are you working that job if you don't like it?" It's like it eliminates that, because in the gig economy, these individuals are working, and it's their full choice. It's their full autonomy. So it's like you said, it's a huge accountability, right? But it eliminates that whole question. And
They choose their work every day.
yeah, so you're creating a retainment and attainment,
Yeah.
factor regardless inside your organization. So I think it's a big need. But it all goes back to, I think, we've had some or our clients that we service seasonally, like always come back, and those agents always come back.
Yep.
So we always hit those metrics when they're needed it most. But I think the old ways of hiring is really, I think it's already extinct, but I don't know how much lifeline
Well, it's
it
going
has
to take
left.
some time, I think, for
You know?
people to realize that there's alternatives, right?
Yeah.
I think this is pretty new space. I think our industry, rightfully so, takes a little bit of time to adapt or adopt new technology. This is probably an old statistic now, but I'm pretty sure within the last couple of years, on-premise telephony was still the majority of contact centers, or something like that. Anyway,
Sure.
and I just assumed everyone was on the cloud, because
Yeah.
it's been a long time since I've seen an
Right.
on-premise system. Anyway, so I think that's an interesting perspective, because that technology has been around for maybe 20 years, maybe more. I'm getting into when I was probably in middle school at that point, but the idea is that it's going to take some time to adapt. And I think it's right, because you need to be careful about what you do with your customers. Like, your customers are your business. You can't just rip things out and change it and trash your customer experience. So I think you got to move slow, but I also believe people are realizing that this is a permanent change in the workforce. I don't think we go back to everyone kind of just going to the traditional route. In fact, I don't see it being possible.
I don't see it being possible, but I also think too, like, you say that, customers are everything, but especially in your busy season, like, when you go to, I don't know, when you go to like a restaurant that you really, really like on a Saturday night, okay, are you going to give it a heavy review on a Saturday night, or are you going to give it a review, like, I don't know, when you get takeout from there? Probably when you go there and experience it,
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
When it's busy, when people are there, when you get the full immersive experience. And I think, like, when you talk about seasonality and companies experiencing seasonality, this is when they hear from their customers the most.
It's when their
Right?
customers need them the most, really.
Retail is a huge
Right.
example of that, right? I mean, retailers are really going to lose, attract, or gain customers during December.
Oh yeah.
And
they're going to remember it next year too. Like, you have a bad
Exactly.
retail experience, you're not going to go back the next year, because you say, well, that was
Brand
an
loyalty
absolute
is-
nightmare.
brand loyalty is everything.
And it's so hard to execute the seasonal stuff, or the busy season, that
Yeah.
you get challenges at this time. And it makes sense, but there's a really big incentive to solve that.
Yeah.
And if you see a better way to solve it, I think coming back to that,
Yeah.
the old way, kind of traditional full-time permanent employee is not the best way to flex up,
Mm-mm.
but there's another workforce that's about 40% of the workforce that we can get access to. But it's not as easy as just saying, and to your point, you can't just like go say, okay, we're gonna go hire gig workers. It actually isn't that easy at all. And that's where you actually have to bring in technology and partners that specialize in this space, because all of these issues with your customer experience, with your operation, can truly just evaporate, but you need a partner that knows exactly how this works.
Yeah, you have to adapt the training, you have to adapt the onboarding, the hiring, the recruiting, all of it.
Yeah, you're gonna reinvent the whole thing. And again, that's back to what, how we got to this point. I mean, it takes a total revision in technology. We have to kind of think about it from a marketplace perspective. These are folks that are choosing to work. So how do you make it to where they come in and choose to work and choose to do a great job? Total change in the way we think. And fortunately, we've had a pretty good run at it so far. And we've got a lot of experience. I'd say tax season, I go back to that a lot. I mean, that's the most extreme example, but thousands of agents, in a short amount of time. But then there's even the ongoing stuff like telecommunications,
Sure.
Where you've got a busy summer season. So we're seeing success in all these facets of the industry's, highly complex work too.
Yeah, I think speaking for myself, but you too, we were excited to speak on this topic today because we both have been on both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
In your career, my career, past and present, we've been on the side where we've had to use the old ways, and we've really seen the struggles and the chaos it can create and the problems. And then we've been on this side where wow, this is actually pretty seamless and the results are good. And I mean, so many clients come in and it's like, wow, like the quality, you're beating us in quality. It's like, well, we're not beating you, like Trevor and I are not beating you in quality, but the reps are choosing to be the best, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're excited to go to work. Like we're not dropping shifts, we're showing up, and it's all them because it's a different workforce that we're tapping into.
Yep.
It's a completely different workforce. So I think that's huge. So let's talk a little bit about let's get into more of like practicing using GigCX during the busy season, right?
Yeah.
I think what doesn't go away is forecasting volume and the
Yeah.
seasonal need. And there is some misconception to your point. Let's just go hire gig workers, like 10 days out. And I tell a lot of our clients or prospects, yes, we're going to be ready for you when you need us. However, we still want a smooth transition, and we still, because we don't want inadequate onboarding like we talked about.
Yeah.
We want a great agent experience because our brand means something for us too. And so how do we work with clients on your take to say, okay, here's a 90-day outlook, and what does that 90-day outlook look like to you? And
I think 90 days is a great, 60, 90 days, somewhere in there is really
Sure.
good. I mean, I like to say we can move at breakneck speed. Like one example I like to say it over cocktails usually. So we got introduced to a client on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, this is because they had a very emergent need.
Right.
By Wednesday, we had the contract signed, and by Thursday, we had agents helping them take calls.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible, but that's not the way you want to operate. That's very reactive, but again, we can do that. But it's way better to just go ahead and get things set up in advance, and then that just adds to the success. I mean, and we can anticipate any sort of issues that emerge, whether that's in how we. Whether that's the hiring need, maybe you needed more agents than you thought, maybe you needed fewer. Maybe we can kind of refine that over that 60-day plan. We refine the certification. Remember, we're certifying agents, these flexible workers, just like you would your internal agents.
Yeah.
So let's make sure that process is smooth, and the agents kind of come out of that feeling confident, because you don't want to skimp there, and then your agents are the ones that go talk to the customers and feel the pressure of being underprepared.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to make sure that's smooth and all the handoffs are smooth. And again, 60, 90 days, I mean, more than enough time for us
More
to
than
get
enough
that.
time.
Yeah.
And I think too, it gives us a unique ability to skill assess a lot of these individuals.
Oh, yeah.
And not only that we have data on them, but also we use AI to tell us, okay, of these people that want to work on this campaign or for this client, who's best suited and why. Tell us the skills, tell us everything that's gone on with their work career, so that, when we're even pre-certifying, we're giving our clients the best possible scenario to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, to talk a little bit about AI, I think a lot of people think about AI as a solution to reduce contacts in their contacts. And in some cases, I'm sure it is. But we actually think the bigger opportunity is to make us better. Use AI to make our operation better, to attract, retain, and identify even the best agents. And to your point, we run everyone through, we call it our AI matching algorithm. So that means it's specifically tailored to the campaign that we're working on. Let's say, somebody working in tax is not the same as somebody working in telecom tech support. But maybe they are in some cases, right? Or maybe it's a sales role that we want to make sure this person has sales experience or is showing other behaviors that indicate that they're going to be higher performing.
Yeah.
Or even better, we've worked with them before and we've seen their sales performance, and we can just say, oh yeah, we know they're good.
Yeah.
We're going to advance them. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing with data, and with this workforce, we can actually do that.
Yeah, and and a real life example is, if you compare the two schools of thinking, and you have the old way of hiring, traditional contact center, I need 50 people by December 1st. I mean, the recruiting team goes in their weekly meetings, the morning meetings, and they're like, okay, 5 done, 15 done, 25 done. Like, who are these 5, 10, 15, 25 people? Like, you have no idea. And by the way, it's also a really busy season, so the operations team is probably taking a back seat. No, I can't talk to all these individuals. Right. So then it's, okay, well then here are your people. For us, we're matching the skill sets that our clients are demanding inside those 50 people, right? So we know here's 50 people, and these 50 people match X, Y, and Z.
And I'll even say, even if your operations team or whoever else is interviewing folks, 99%, maybe not, that's not a real stat, I'm making this one up, but let's say almost everyone is a terrible interviewer. And you're not interviewing for real data. You're building, and it's okay.
You're building rapport off of, that's a whole psychology issue, right? Like,
yes.
Philosophy and everything, because you're interviewing somebody and you're hoping to build a rapport. Man, I really like Trevor.
Yeah.
Which is great. Like, Trevor's
cool.
You're really good at a lot of things, but you may not be great at handling certain tasks that we need you to handle. Right? That's why everyone has different jobs inside the workforce.
So you should use data in those situations. Now, I'm not saying you totally eliminate the human element, but just realizing the weaknesses there. Not only is it a tremendous waste of time or tremendous investment of time, it's probably also not that effective. And so again, we're kind of learning that process. I didn't mean to digress there.
No, it's a great topic.
Anyway, so I think to summarize sort of this how kind of question is like, it's not as easy as, oh, we have a seasonal need, let's go look at this workforce and let's do it ourselves. It's actually, there's a lot more to it. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. You can try to figure it out, and will help you. But the other thing is, like, it does make a lot of sense to bring in the technology and the partnership that's really designed for this type of thing that can tap into this network. Anyway, that's kind of.
Yeah, so I think we've touched, like to your extreme example, we can move really fast, and I think probably a little bit better than most, like the traditional contact ways. Like, yes, we can, but it really is, we're still tackling every single step from, okay, here's the forecasted volume, to hiring plan, to here are the people that you need, to certifying agents, and then, okay, once people are certified, then we're good to go, and we continue to have an operational relationship with our clients of, here are the metrics we're hitting, here's the KPIs, here's the quality, weekly meetings. So it's the same, but then when the seasonality dips, well, you're not really.
Well, what we're finding in that situation too is, there's a really good use case for a gig workforce, ongoing, right?
For sure. And to finish the point, it's like, when the seasonality dips, you're not sacrificing your culture.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
And
you come back to the same team you had.
Yeah, exactly.
And it might even be better because they're not as burned out. There's a massive burnout that happens. I'm pretty sure after tax season, everyone at those big companies takes like a month off.
But also within, this is something we mentioned previously, is even with your tenured people who have been there, because it puts a lot of stress on them.
Right.
Because if the recruiting team can't get the numbers and they meet half of their goal, well, then it's like overtime, and it's
mandatory overtime.
Yeah, and it's
100% occupancy.
Exactly.
It's brutal.
And you're not getting what really gig CX is meant for, which is autonomy. It's better work-life balance, it's less stress, and it's more focus.
To your point, 35%, we estimate 35% cost savings on all things gig economy shift off. Now, the savings get even more extreme when you're talking about seasonality. Mm-hmm. I think one of our highly seasonal partners, we estimated they saved about 50 to 60%. And it is really aggressive because you don't have to deal with that ramp up, you don't have to deal with that ramp down, you don't have all the operating costs of managing it. Like,
the model takes care of itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. So like, it's somewhat automatic. It's like the easy button, right? And there's a real cost to that. So one of the things, like, we get asked this a lot. I think what we do that I'm not sure. I like our approach is when we do get these questions, we'll actually sit down and do the model. and we'll share the model. Like it's not like a trade secret or anything. Like we want everyone to feel comfortable that we've identified what the costs are actually going to be, and then hopefully actually they turn out to be better than what we forecast. And so anytime this question comes up, I always say let's run the numbers and like let's look at it.
Yeah.
And every single time it's significantly a savings.
Yeah, every time. We just did that. I just did that with one of our clients who needs seasonal work, and they're trying to come on board with us, and we just ran the numbers. And sometimes I just get a little whoa, because it's a no-brainer,
Yeah.
And that's just like production time. You're not talking about the training and the recruiting, and then now we have to culturally release people, because that always happens.
Right.
And so I think savings too goes beyond just the financial. But
yeah, absolutely. I think we covered a lot of ground today too. I mean, I think the cultural elements are real. I think the fact that there's a just really misalignment with the traditional model to seasonal demands on a contact center. There's another alternative, this really large, highly engaged, high quality workforce that we can tap into. We know that it's not so simple as to just say, I'm going to go work with that workforce, but you kind of need a partner. You need someone who understands the process, has the technology, and then we know that it's actually a way you can go to your CFO and present this plan, and they'll appreciate it.
They'll always sign up for it.
Yeah, CFOs get it.
Yeah,
like,
CFOs
immediately.
get it.
We believe that the gig model is a perfect fit for anything that's seasonal and volatile, whether it's annually for a week, for a month, or even throughout the year. You kind of need that responsive workforce, right?
Yeah, you have to have it. We always say the gig economy, yes, it's a remote workforce, it's a very strong workforce, but I think that's a really key point, because when you're talking about the old ways of hiring, let's say it is brick and mortar on site, you can look and everyone can do their own research, but I will challenge somebody to find any research or data or survey that says less than 50% of the American workforce doesn't want some sort of flexibility.
Okay.
So you take that number, then these old traditional ways, you're going to such a niche market.
Yep.
So it's difficult.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, so this is awesome. Thanks again, Nate.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you all for tuning into this episode. If you have questions, want to chat more, maybe want to kind of just talk a little bit more about some of the discussions we had today, please reach out. LinkedIn is a great place to talk to us, or find us on our website. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.
Thanks, guys.